Specific sector of direct carrier billing is globally in over 120 countries. It's a $12 to $14 billion aggregate sector of telco carrier commerce, and forecast to grow to in the neighborhood of 22 to 24 billion in the next 3 to 5 years. It's sizable, and it's involved even by the marquee players of likes of Apple and Google and others. And they, quite frankly, have been very helpful in helping the direct carrier billing industry, of which there's almost 3 dozen suppliers around the world, introduce this service in other parts of the world. So there you have direct carrier billing. Then you also have carrier mobile money, which has become a multi-billion-dollar sector of telco carrier commerce as well. Also in nearly 100 countries. Everyone knows about premium SMS, and it's had its issues in certain markets. RCS is coming, and there'll be premium flavors of that as well. And there are other forms of carrier commerce that are coming into focus. For instance, in India, you have payment banks that were authorized by the RBI, the Reserve Bank of India, and it's been around for about 3 years now. They've somewhat underperformed, and there's debate about whether restrictions by the RBI may be holding them back for being financially viable. See how that plays out over time. In the fourth quarter of 18, the CBN, Central Bank of Nigeria, embarked on a similar kind of initiative with payment services banks. And in India, there were 41 applicants for payment banks. 11 were approved. Eventually, 6 of those 11 made it to market. 3 of those 6 are operated by telcos. In Nigeria, with the Payment Services Bank, there have been news that the first movers have all been telcos. So that later this year in 2019, you'll see the emergence of telcos operating payment services banks in Nigeria. So Nigeria and India, 2 of the biggest population countries in the world with significant unbanked populations. Again, telcos are center stage in terms of having a potential impact. So the telco industry's role as, in essence, a quiet giant does not seem to have the visibility. Not unusual, coming from telco land. Legacy thinking in the industry is understandably fundamentally communication centric, but there is an increasing realization that the billing side, the assets and the core competencies, are also another set of crown jewels for the industry. And increasingly, you're seeing the likes of Orange, Telenor, MTN, Singtel, etc., that are embarking on significant mobile financial services strategies. Those are the front runners, but there are dozens of companies, so telco companies, that are getting into MFS, DFS, mobile financial services, digital financial services. You have also in the aggregate environment, foundations, bilaterals, multilaterals, private donors that have been granting in the neighborhood of $35 to $40 billion annually, growing at 20 to 30% plus since 2011, grants to the financial inclusion space. So it's an indication of the seriousness of the commitment to make financial inclusion happen, to onboard as many of the unbanked, which has declined now to about 1.7 billion. It was closer to upper nearly 3 billion over a decade ago. So great progress is being made, but it has been slowing down. The first newsworthy item that came to our attention was in the second month, the first quarter of 2016, when news came out of Uganda of literally economic chaos. Why did that happen? It turned out that the Ugandan Communications Commission abruptly ordered the disabling of all mobile money platforms before and during national elections. News reports said that the reason for this decision was that there were concerns about vote buying fraud. When Finnclude first saw this, we thought maybe there's an opportunity for us to make this not happen again. If we could find, has anybody seen this before? So we put an alert out to our membership, which at the time was about 50 globally, saying, had anybody seen anything like this before? And if you had, what was done? Now, the assumption was maybe there's some argumentation out there that you can go back to the government and say, come on, you don't need to shut down the mobile money platforms. But interestingly, one of our members came back and he was the head of mobile money operations with telco in Bangladesh. And he said in his country, his government has the same concerns. They're legit in certain markets. So, our bias was pointed out to us that there's different environmental factors, and sometimes these are genuine problems that need to be addressed. And fortunately, in Bangladesh, there was a well thought out process on the communications front that involved pre-planning. How do we get the word out when we need to have a planned outage, that we don't have this kind of a consequence of economic chaos? And a plan was devised in Bangladesh with the government, with the telcos, and other interested stakeholders to be sure that advanced planning was communicated adequately so that desired parties throughout the society, citizens, businesses, etc., were ready for the planned outage, plus the government was satisfied with its ability to minimize the problems with potential vote buying fraud. So they, in essence, shut down their platforms in Bangladesh during elections, but no disruptions. Everybody's happy. They're ready for it. Vote buying fraud is minimized, no problems. And they were willing to share that success knowledge. So we took a half step. It was a half step in validating our proof of concept. Back then, we reached out to the UCC as well as the then 5 Ugandan telcos that were operating mobile money to make them aware we were a new on the scene entity, nonprofit, industry association, knowledge community, peer learning kind of an entity, willing to share this knowledge for free without obligation, because we're advocates for the industry and we want us to be better at what we do globally to help continue advancing the underlying goal of financial inclusion, advancing it and sustaining that advance. Now, initially, we didn't hear back from them, but in late 2018, we circled back. There's some new leaders at the UCC, and we've engaged one of their board members right now. Moving the proof of concept a bit further, in fourth quarter of 2018, there was news out of Rwanda that the UN High Commission on Refugees was planning to embark on a project with partners, including telcos, to try to bring digital financial services to refugees in Rwanda. With Finnclude's ongoing daily consumption and monitoring of industry developments, Finnclude has been able to identify that there's, depending on how you parse it, but in our informal tracking approach, there's over 100 forms of mobile financial services, for crowdfunding sponsored by telcos. Telcos are getting involved in mobile money, call it use cases that impact agriculture, education, healthcare, alternative energy. So as you parse it and those nuanced levels of detail, there's success knowledge that's growing in sophistication by the day that we know of, and we know where it is, and we keep track of, to the best extent we can, who's involved with that, so we could conceivably reach out to them if we see someone else is trying that but they're struggling. So in the case of the UN High Commission, we reached out to them and said, we are aware that earlier in 2018, another telco was involved with an undertaking in bringing bulk distribution of payments, digital financial services, to refugees in Uganda. Would you be interested in us helping facilitate getting you some of those insights from that undertaking? And they were very thankful that we reached out to them and welcomed any insights that could help them with their planning efforts. So that was provided to both the UN High Council of Refugees as well as partners, and they're in the process of working through that. And we, on a continual basis, when we see things, whether it's related to telco financial inclusion, it could be digital identity as it that may pertain to regulatory concerns and hurdles for anti-money laundering and KYC. When we see that kind of relevant information that might pertain to the work that they're doing, we'll pass it along, no obligation. Um, Plus with the request that we're welcoming feedback because our model's a work in progress and we